Quietly Brave HQ, research-based audio overviews, powered by Pratiq. Welcome. Today, we're pulling the lens way back to look at something pretty significant, a complex and, frankly, escalating pressure system that's impacting youth all over the world. This isn't really about isolated incidents or, regional anxieties. What we're seeing is a systemic challenge, and it's unfolding globally, so we have to treat it that way. The overview we're diving into today functions a bit like like two critical instruments. You've got a system-level monitor and a practical navigation guide all in one.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to understand this pattern not as some kind of individual failure, but as a persistent cross-cultural issue that's really showing the strain on the systems we all live in.
And that perspective is, well, it's everything. It's what makes this so valuable.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if you only look at youth pressure through the lens of one country, you jump to these very localized solutions that completely miss the bigger picture. What's fascinating here is how the analysis just deliberately avoids that. It maps out how stress and pressure show up differently across cultures, side by side. And when you see that, you realize, okay, this intense experience is, without a doubt, a widespread global thing. This episode is an AI-assisted audio overview based on structured synthesis. So to start this conversation, we really need to ground it in some recent analysis. The overview we're using, it pulls from very current statistics, looking at indicators from 2024, 2025.
It's like a fresh snapshot.
Exactly. It's an analytical snapshot of right now, not just, rehashing old narratives. It gives us a real sense of the immediacy of it all.
Okay, so let's unpack that systemic strain.
Yeah.
If we're shifting the focus away from blaming the individual, what data points are shouting the loudest? What are the indicators that really signal this broader stress?
The analysis points to two highly concerning indicators that are acting like critical warning signs across much of the developed world. The first is data that shows the sustained sadness among adolescents. Sustained. And we're not talking about something fleeting or situational. The measures show it's chronic. The analysis uses data from the U.S. to really illustrate this long-term emotional weight.
Right. And sustained sadness, especially across a big population sample, isn't just a mood. It's an early warning that the environment itself isn't providing the right support for emotional growth.
Exactly. And the second key indicator is, well, it's arguably more alarming because it points to an acute crisis. It's the alarming reports of rising emergency visits for self-harm in parts of North America.
Wow. That immediately reframes the whole conversation.
Yeah.
Because self-harm is often a last resort coping mechanism when pressure feels completely unmanageable.
It is.
And when you see a statistical jump in emergency interventions like that, you're not talking about resilience training anymore. You're talking about a societal crisis signal. It just forces the focus away from individual failings, lacking grit, and puts it squarely on the external system, the environment they have to navigate.
The system itself is failing to support the emotional load.
Yes. So if the system is globally strained, we need to see how that pressure shows up globally. This is where it gets particularly insightful for me. The data shows that while the outcome is similar, stressed youth, the inputs, the cultural pressures, they vary wildly. How does this stress pattern actually look around the world?
Well, this global framing, it reinforces that same outcome, but it highlights this incredible diversity in the cause. The material gives us these specific geographic snapshots that really illustrate it.
Okay.
So take East Asia, for example. The environment there is just. It's characterized by relentless academic and social competition.
Right. High-stakes exams.
Exactly. Things like the Gaopao, which are presented as the only gateway to economic stability, to social honor. So self-worth becomes incredibly conditional, tied almost exclusively to performance metrics.
And if that's one end of the spectrum pressure to perform right now, what does the other end look like in, say, Europe, where the academic paths are maybe seen as a bit less rigid?
That's a really sharp contrast. In many parts of Europe, the pressure is less about the immediate grade and much more existential. It's linked to this widespread uncertainty about the future.
So things like the economy or the environment.
Yes. Specifically, economic worries, like how precarious the job market is, the difficulty in finding affordable housing, and then you layer on these huge environmental and geopolitical concerns. The stress isn't just about passing a test. It's this profound sense of instability about the future they're inheriting.
I see.
And you also see these unique cultural expressions. The overview mentions distinct social withdrawal patterns in Japan, which are often tied to deep cultural norms about failure, and then you look somewhere like Nepal. The pressure on youth there is critically complicated by economic instability, which drives migration, fractures support systems, and puts
Hmm.
enormous pressure on young people to be the main economic providers.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Whether the input is academic performance or existential dread or migration
Mhm.
economics, the core output is the same. Sustained, severe pressure.
Yes, the stress is driven either by performance or by precarity. It really is a cross-cultural pattern.
Okay, now our listener was very clear about this. Understanding the problem is one thing, but they want actionability. So this material, it moves beyond just describing the problem. It offers what it calls a navigation guide with concrete strategies for families and mentors.
Right, and this guide is where the rubber meets the road. It turns that abstract data into practical steps. It's crucial to clarify, though, just as the analysis does, that these are supportive tools. They're guides for recognition, for conversation. They're not a substitute for clinical or professional help.
Of course,
It's a-
they're about steadying the ship at home.
Exactly.
So let's detail that first step.
Mm.
Awareness, identification. What should families be looking for? The guidance starts with a very modern problem area, digital consumption.
Right. It encourages a specific awareness of sustained changes in digital patterns. So you're observing shifts in both the amount of time and the type of content a young person is consuming. Is it suddenly excessive? Or have they just stopped engaging altogether? That's often a first red flag.
And what about beyond the screen?
Well, coupled with those digital cues, they emphasize tangible physical and behavioral signals. Concrete, observable shifts. Things like sustained irritability, chronic changes in sleep or eating, or a noticeable withdrawal from friends or hobbies they used to love. The goal is to spot behavioral signals of distress.
And once you spot a signal like that, I think the common pitfall for an adult is to immediately jump in and try to fix it, which it often backfires. How does the guide help structure communication to avoid that?
This is where the tools are so practical.
Yeah.
The material recommends what they call the 80-20 listening approach.
Okay, 80-20.
The idea is simple, but it can be emotionally challenging for the adult. When a young person is talking about stress, the adult has to commit to spending 80% of the time just actively listening, validating the feeling.
And only 20% offering solutions.
Only 20% offering perspective or guidance. It really challenges that parental instinct to jump in and solve it or, minimize the struggle.
What's the benefit of holding back like that?
The main benefit is building trust. It demonstrates unconditional worth, which is the exact opposite of the performance-driven system causing all the stress.
I see.
Just listening, validating without judgment, it de-escalates everything. The focus shifts from, I have to fix this external problem, to, I feel heard and safe right here. It creates the space for them to process things themselves.
Okay, so that's communication. What about building their own resilience?
The guidance also gets into that. It recommends simple grounding techniques methods to bring focus back to the present moment, like deep breathing or noticing 5 things you can see. And it also suggests supporting the creation of personal coping toolkits.
The toolkit idea is powerful, but how do you introduce that concept without making a young person feel, singled out or like there's something wrong with them?
That's a great question. The guidance suggests framing it as a proactive, collaborative project, not a reaction to a meltdown.
That's for everyone.
It's a universally helpful practice for stress. And it has to be tangible and personal. So it could be a physical box with sensory items or a playlist or a list of people to call. The key is that the individual chooses the contents, so the tools actually work for them when stress is high. It's about teaching them to self-regulate, not just wait for help.
This brings us back to the big question then. Long-term resilience. If the pressure is external and we're teaching coping skills, how do they find sustainable internal strength? The conclusion of the material offers this really crucial philosophical reframing. It links the whole global problem back to individual identity.
It does. The final analysis presents this sharp contrast between 2 different models for identity. And these models dictate not just how you manage stress, but how you define your own fundamental worth.
Okay.
On one side, you have the performance-driven identity. In this model, self-worth is completely tied to external metrics: the grade, the salary, the social media likes, the achievement. If I succeed, I am worthy. But this model is inherently fragile because achievement is temporary. The metrics are always shifting, and they're mostly outside of your control.
Which creates that state of chronic anxious optimization.
Exactly. You see it reflected in that sustained sadness data.
It's that exhausting treadmill we talked about because the goalposts are always moving based on comparison.
Precisely. The moment you hit one milestone, society or your own brain presents a new, higher one. So the alternative offered is the purpose-based identity. This framework encourages a much more resilient understanding of self-worth. It emphasizes internal values you can control, like curiosity, integrity, effort, contribution, and long-term meaning.
So it's about who you are, not just what you achieved this week.
That's it. And what's crucial here is that shifting away from the performance model isn't just a philosophical preference. The analysis argues it is a necessary practical move for building genuine resilience. Because when your self-worth rests on an internal foundation, external failures, a bad grade, a job loss, they become feedback. They're not existential threats to your identity. That's the path to sustainable mental health, not just optimizing for short-term outcomes that lead to burnout.
And that ties this whole deep dive together.
Yeah.
You now have the system monitor, which shows you the rising strain globally and the specific actionable tools, the navigation guide, for addressing these pressures in your own life. It's about using that global perspective to inform very personal, very localized support.
Right. And to leave you with a final thought to consider, if we accept that this pressure stems from rigid achievement metrics and constant social comparison, what's the one foundational structure in education or in family life or in culture that needs to change most immediately to genuinely encourage that purpose-based identity over the performance-based one?
Thank you for listening to Quietly Brave HQ, research-based audio overviews powered by Pratiq. Until next time, namaste.